Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and again, I'm speaking with Susan Dugan about A Course in Miracles. And today, Susan suggested the topic of the development of trust, which is certainly one of my favorites as well. And I keep thinking it's the old, you teach best what you most need to learn. And so hopefully we'll teach it well. At least I'll speak for myself. I certainly am learning. I feel like I'm, in terms of intellectual understanding of the Course, maybe in mid grade school or high school, but in terms of the in-depth application, well, we're all toddlers, as Ken Wapnick points out, right? So,
Yes,
but we're all learning to
very, very
trust.
true.
So anyway, great topic. And anyway, welcome, Susan. Anything you want to announce before we get going?
No, really, just I am doing my Tuesday night forgiveness course class here in Denver. Has moved to Skype in the last 8 weeks or whatever it's been.
Mm-hmm.
And so if anyone from out of Colorado is, or outside, it doesn't really matter where you're from online.
Right.
So, but it's not really a class for new students, but for people that are ongoing students, especially interested in Ken Wapnick, they feel free to contact me by email, and they can do that through my website, forays-in-forgiveness.com. And we can talk about whether it's, I can tell them about the class and whether it seems like a good fit for them.
That sounds
And it's
great.
at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening, Mountain Time.
Uh-huh. And I've been enjoying it lately very much. So yeah.
Bruce has been coming in, yes. So that's been a lot of fun.
Lots of great insights. Yeah, good group. Also, just for people
that may, class.
Yeah, for people that aren't familiar with your website, you have a wealth of wonderful material, including some really unique interviews with some of the staff at the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, right. Jeffrey and Rosemary, and lots of back and with Ken, of course, too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, please feel free to visit the website. There's a lot of good information. Interviews and information about the foundation and about the practice of what this actually trying to live the Course means. And I've written a lot of essays that are posted there. So.
And they're fun reads. I mean, I enjoy reading your writing because you get into your own story, but not in a way that's tiresome. It's just kind of you have little vignettes that engage people and then inexorably draw people back to the Course principles and show how everyone's life can be an example of just looking at the specifics and using it to generalize. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, and we are really asked to make this very specific. I mean, this isn't, we can read the general, the general topics in the Course and the workbook, but unless we're really applying it to what seems to be the content of our lives, that's our classroom, that's our curriculum. Mm-hmm. And we have to first look at how invested we are in our own stories and our own defensiveness. And, this is a path for people that really do, even when you first come to it, it kind of requires at least some awareness, self-awareness that, your relationships are difficult. that you have some sense that that there's something more going on in our relationships and that we have at least some awareness of our unkind thoughts. Mm-hmm. And of course, we become much more aware of them as we start really becoming intimate with what the Course is saying and what Jesus is saying, and looking at them with him and learning to do that without, beating ourselves up, but to really, really begin to see the reasons that relationships are so difficult for all of us. I mean, they really are, whether we're in touch with that or not. And because, we're trying to get our needs met externally as a substitute for the love of God that we think we threw away, and it can't work. There are no substitutes, and we're looking in the wrong place. The love of God was never really sacrificed or destroyed. We're still really within that love, but we've deliberately forgotten that, and so we're pretty much at war with ourselves all the time, and the Course really exposes. It helps us really begin to confront that and see that is what I'm doing, and that's what's making me miserable, not the ones that seem to be, the people or the situations in my life that seem to be causing all this conflict.
Exactly,
That the
exactly.
conflict is really, within my mind, and it's because I've chosen the teacher of conflict, which is, the ego, the part of
Hmm.
me that wants to be separate and believes it is, and believes that, I really do exist apart from God, but it's not my fault. Right.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
very succinct and actually very thorough description of the course's metaphysics. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right. So the development of trust is the section in the manual that we're going to talk about today.
Mhm.
And the manual for teachers is really, a manual of that is we teach through the course by demonstrating, by learning from this new teacher how to challenge our unkind thoughts and challenge our allegiance to the ego and our selfishness and our neediness and our projections onto others, of that the reason that I'm unhappy is because, or don't feel loved is because of them. um, or I can't, catch a break, or whatever story, whatever version of that we're telling ourselves. Um, and this is a journey in really beginning to take those projections back, to look in the mind, in the mind with Jesus, and to see that they're really, they're just made up. We've sold ourselves a huge fiction,
Mhm.
and it's a horror story, and it's not really, it's not serving us, but there is a part of our mind that can, that holds the memory of a peace beyond all understanding in this world, that can't be shaken or threatened, or, and wouldn't that be nice? Because the latest thing I was reading was murder hornets. Did you read about that?
I've caught a little bit of news on that and thinking, well,
Yeah.
how long it'll take for them to
Just when you thought the dystopian dream was, that was not weird enough.
No, it'll keep getting weird and morphing
Right.
into yet further weirdness, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A metaphor that came to mind as you were sharing just now, it was the one that I've thought a few years ago, and it seems like it applies, as the getting closer to summer and things are warming up outside, and I was thinking like the ocean, and the ego's thought system is like this oceanic um, insanity, and because so much of it is hidden, we have no idea what's under there. But it's the metaphor of draining the swamp. To use the course's curriculum, we're actually sort of draining ego's ocean, slowly but
Right.
surely, and revealing the desolation that's there. And I think we have holdouts and we have hope that maybe somewhere in ego's ocean there's something that's going to work for us. But the more we
Very
drain it, the more desolation we see, and the more we realize, no, it's underneath that. It's just a vast desert, but it's covered over by what appears to be, some promise and hope. Um, but like you were saying, it's a fiction. That's the most important part. Is once the total desolation is exposed, um, which I think actually ties into one of the stages we're going to talk about. Then at that point was just like, okay, I had it all wrong. I really was betting on the wrong horse here, and there's nothing in this desert I want. And as Ken Wapnick said, once you recognize you're in a desert, the thing to do is leave. But
Yes, it
the,
could
the
be.
fortunate part is that we really do have a real world to return to that we never left, and nothing has been compromised or damaged or made uninhabitable in any way because of our dreams. So, and we can return to that just
Right.
by
Right.
consistently, more and more frequently, forgiving and
Consistently.
looking at our
Right.
judgments and the desolation of that ego strategy that isn't working. Yeah.
Right. And of course, this section, it's describing a process of, the overall kind of process of what this, which is really hard to describe, but because and of course, since we're having we seem to be having separate dreams as little fragments of the decision-making mind.
Mhm.
Every individual will have different characters and and specifics to apply this to, and a different story and a different drama and all of that. But the overall process is what he's trying to get at, and really that it is a process and it's not linear. I was noticing this week that again that I can go from really feeling a piece not of this world when I'm aligned with the teacher in our mind that knows that, and I have those times where I can be there because everything around me is still in chaos and quite threatening by the world's terms, but and yet I'm not caught up in it, and I'm not I'm very I feel very present and connected with the truth in some way, and not and kind. I'm not having this constant judgment going on, and it's such a relief when we're in that. But then the next day, then the next 2 days, after 2 days of that, I was just a crazy person again. So that this is we're really afraid, and often our and so the journey is this very much back and forth in the split mind, and there seem to be different stages in our path, but really it's just really which teacher we're associating with at any moment, and the process of consistently applying this process of forgiveness, this practice of forgiveness, which is really reminding myself that whatever seems to be the cause of why I'm so upset is not I'm wrong about that, and or just maybe even I'm wrong about that, but introducing that doubt and opening to the part, and admitting that there is a part of my mind that remains peaceful. That's the process of forgiveness. That's the practice. And the more consistently that we apply that over and over, and are willing to do that, when we're crazy, when we really are, it does seem like all hell's breaking loose, and of course it was broken loose by someone else or something else. I'm just the
seems like it, doesn't it?
recipient of that, right? But yes, of course. But so it's that practice that really is the ongoing journey, is part of the ongoing journey, and the guilt that is in our mind that we're not aware of, that's really causing this whole thing and causing us to be in so much denial about the truth, is just sort of gradually undone, and until there's really eventually, Ken uses the analogy of the ladder that the Song of Prayer uses, that our beginning of the spiritual journey is when we come to the bottom rung of the ladder with that recognition of there has to be a better way of relating here, and then but that's just the very beginning, and we're at the bottom rung or rungs of that ladder for quite a long time, because we have enormous resistance, because we're not in touch with the fear that we have in the vow that we made to the ego, never to look at on this devastation that we think we wrought. And it's terrifying to us, even though we're not really aware of that. We forgot we made it up, but we're aware of the fear, and we're aware that we don't want to let go of this because it's all we have. That's what we think, yeah. So I think as we go through and we can read through this, but just to remember that it's not really linear, and it's not.
Exactly. The other thing I was trying to remind myself when I pick up what was the original third volume of the 3 volumes of the course, it says manuals for teachers, and I always try to remember, it's like I'm always teaching and learning one of 2 thought systems all the time, and everyone is always doing that. And so there's really no stigma about teaching in the conventional sense, and I think that's always a good preface, is that if I can remember that I'm 24/7, I'm teaching myself and everyone I meet, either kindness or fear, and
and learning, right? I'm learning one of the systems as I teach. That it's because it's choosing that part of my mind that kind of animates the self I think I am. Then that is really, if I'm choosing the ego, then the self I think I am will be intolerant, and will be feeling victimized all the time, and defensive, and in conflict, really judgmental, and afraid, and anxious and all the depressed, all the things that that we all feel as bodies, as personal selves. But when I'm, choosing the kind use of the body is to use it as like everything else as a classroom of forgiveness. So when I've chosen the inner teacher of kindness and love and shared interest, the shared interest of finding our way home and awakening from the dream, then that love just flows through this personal self, and then it's used in a kind way. That's really the only way that we can use the body kindly.
Yeah, it's through. I like the word through, because through kind of implies
Mhm.
we're a conduit, but it's not coming from the little s self. Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Should we dive into the content?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You want
How about
you
if
want to
I
start or?
how about if I skip to the first stage? I think we've kind of laid the foundation that it really is a
Yeah.
process of slowly developing trust, and and being really patient with ourselves and everyone else, of course. So the first one, um, the 6 stages that are talked about here. Again, we've talked that they're not linear, and we go through back and forth through all of them all the time. Anyway, the first one says, first they must go through what might be called a period of undoing. This need not be painful, but it is usually so experienced. It seems as if things are being taken away, and it is rarely understood initially that their lack of value is merely being recognized. How can lack of value be perceived unless the perceiver is in a position where he must see things in a different light? He is not yet at a point at which he can make the shift entirely internally, and so the plan will sometimes call for changes in what seem to be external circumstances. These changes are always helpful. When the teacher of God has learned that much, he goes on to the second stage. And we were talking about that the other evening, about change is always being helpful. And to me, that is a reminder that everything is either an expression of love or a call for love seen
Right.
properly. If I can remember that and not take things personally, then that must mean I'm not identifying with that personal self, and I'm identifying with the transpersonal self, if you will, which is the capital S self that the Course refers to as the Holy Spirit, or Jesus.
Well, and really, this whole world was built on the thought of change. That we
Mm-hmm.
changed God, and so really, we're under, it's a very unstable setting that we've imagined. Everything is constantly changing. We're constantly feeling like
Mm-hmm.
the ground is shifting beneath us. And again, like I have all these random things that I have to adapt to. And I mean, what a great example we're going through right now of, feeling really confronting that, um, I was going to say loss of control, but that we never really had any control, of external circumstances,
Exactly.
because that but we can't really dissociate that in the ways that we all have most of our lives. It's a
Right.
pretty hard pill to swallow. So so really the first stage is some recognition that yeah, the world is really not very reliable. I can't really, again, there has to be another way, at least,
Mm-hmm.
the back and forth, the manipulation we do in our relationships, the constantly trying to, support ourselves in some way that can just fall apart at any moment. And, just all of the ways in which the world can't really be depended on to meet our needs. That's just a given.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the beginning of the spiritual journey is really seeing um, that all of that is can be used and it can be given a different purpose. And again, to really say, help me find that better way. Help me look at this through a part of my mind that is stable, that is safe, that is loving,
And we do have
regardless of.
yeah. I was just saying we all do have a stable genius within ourselves, and that's the
Right,
spirit.
right. That's right. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the only real stability and the only real wisdom that we have. And if we think that it's in our personhood, it's like not so much. And like you're saying, it's like it's it's really kind of daunting at times when we realize how clueless we are as individuals. And I think part of that process, especially these earlier stages, is recognizing you know, more and more how, well, through the whole process really, how you know, the depth of our cluelessness was not evident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Very much so.
Yeah.
So, okay, the next paragraph, he says, next, the teacher of God must go through a period of sorting out. This is always somewhat difficult because having learned that the changes in his life are always helpful, and I would add, and given them a new purpose, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
He must now decide all things on the basis of whether they increase the helpfulness or hamper it, you know. And I mean, this is really a, you know, again, we're making constant choices as a decision-making mind to either in every moment, do I want to use this to root myself more deeply in the dream, or to take another step toward awakening? You know, that's the really sorting out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what do I really want, right? What is my purpose? So this is always somewhat difficult because having learned that the changes in his life are always helpful, he must now decide all things, and we also have to apply this consistently to everything, on the basis of whether they increase the helpfulness or hamper it. He will find that many, if not most, of the things he valued before will merely hinder his ability to transfer what he has learned to new situations as they arise. All the things that you valued before, you know, your specialness, all the special relationships, the, you know, my need to be right, my need to compete, my need to, you know, somehow get my neediness itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're bringing up an interesting point, because, and very important one, I think, that's all through the course, and that's one of level confusion, because it's so easy to forget as we're reading this when you see things that, you know, kind of imply things about behavior, or things, you know, situations, or you know, conditions in the world. It's always and only about the mind. The Course in Miracles is always and only about the mind, and so even though there's reference to things going on in the world, they're really symbolic of conditions in our mind that we just need to remember. It's like, oh, I'm projecting that. The world really does exist as a projection in our mind, and it's an illusory one to boot.
Right.
At least in the parts of it that appear to be different, and you know, we're being asked to consider that maybe there's an identity that is based in sameness and shared interests, and that's how we get our way out of, you know, work our way out of the dream, with that, the help from the guide that leads us to that awareness. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So because he has valued what is really valueless, you know, my personal interests, right,
Mm-hmm.
above
Mm-hmm.
all else, he will not generalize the lesson for fear of loss and sacrifice. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful because they're all a classroom,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're all going to help me if I give them that purpose to heal my mind, to let go of this guilt that's keeping me in this hell, right? So it is only to the extent to which they are helpful that any degree of reality or meaning should be accorded them in this world of illusion. The word, quote, value can apply to nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
nothing really happening here. I mean, there's the only meaning is what my mind gives it, right?
Yeah, and that, you know, what jumped out at me is that both of these first two paragraphs in the first two stages, there seems like there's an emphasis on helpfulness, and you know, one of the beginning uh, prayers, if you will, in the text is, "I'm here only to be truly helpful," and if we can remember
Right.
that in everything we do, and realize that we're helping ourselves to help each other, and no one can be left out of that, and that puts everything on a completely different footing, doesn't it? Because from that perspective,
Mhm.
then we really can be afford to be appreciative of everyone and everything, as either giving us an experience of peace, or giving us a reminder that if I'm not seeing that, then that feedback mechanism can bring me back to my mind and give me an opportunity to make a different choice.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Should I read the next one?
Yep.
Okay. The third stage through which the teacher of God must go can be called, quote, a period of relinquishment, unquote. If this is interpreted as giving up the desirable, it will engender enormous conflict. Few teachers of God escape this distress entirely. There is, however, no point in sorting out the valuable from the valueless unless the next obvious step is taken. Therefore, the period of overlap is apt to be one in which the teacher of God feels called upon to sacrifice his own best interests on behalf of truth. He has not realized as yet how wholly impossible such a demand would be. He can learn this only as he actually does give up the valueless. Through this, he learns that where he anticipated grief, he finds a happy lightheartedness. Instead, where he thought something was asked of him, he finds a gift bestowed on him. And again, that's just the shift in perspective when we choose the teacher of kindness and peace and
Mhm.
forgiveness. We realize that the only thing we're asked to sacrifice is an insane thought system that is based on sin, guilt, fear, death,
Right.
grievances, and
Right.
a constant attack defense cycle that is never peaceful. Yeah.
And it's really the relinquishment. I mean, the reason that it causes so much conflict is because it's my judgments. I mean, the valueless that what we really are being asked to relinquish is our judgment, our need to be right, our need to our neediness again, our need to blame, our defensiveness, and we think that that's again, it's all about me, and that if I'm right, I'm right. I'm going to lose something by letting that go,
Mm-hmm.
or letting go my, not defending myself, or um, not, making the point that the other person caused this, and from, because that's the way it seems to me. But what we realize as we can't do this by ourselves. That's why we need help from a teacher that sees that that is not really a loss at all, and by beginning to look with him past what the devastation of this ego thought system, then we have an experience in which we see that we experience that lightheartedness. We realize that it's a relief to let this go, to have those moments, and in over time, elongated moments in which we experience the true release and relief from guilt, and my guilt and your guilt, and we know it includes everyone. We're outside for a moment, the dream of separation, and it's such a relief, and we know in those moments that it was everything that we wanted. And
Exactly.
that's, Jesus teaches by contrast, and so that begins to build our trust in that part of our mind, right? And that I can
Yeah.
really trust this, and more we experience how unreliable the ego thought system really is, how it really hasn't served us, and it really has only brought us pain.
Yeah.
Right.
As we metaphorically, drain the oceanic swamp of egos of deception, we see just a whole lot more desert all the time when we look at it without, the distortions of the ego's cover up. And
Right.
but we see that it's a dream simultaneously. If we're looking at it with Holy Spirit, we'll see, yeah, this was just a really bizarre dream that had no effect on what we really are, and that true identity that is the same for everyone is, perfectly, you know, kept inviolate and intact from any
Right.
possible harm, because it's in a pure non-dual awareness that we can hardly even imagine what that must be like, but we have little promptings and inspirations now and then that could give us glimpses of that when we, even if just for a few moments, let the craziness of the ego's demands on our mind drop away for a while. And that's the relief that we're looking
Right.
for. Yeah. And I think that's why
Hmm.
so many of the workbook lessons emphasize, just give me a few minutes here and there, maybe once an hour, every so
Right.
often, just kind of try to remember that there is a place of peace, and if you have to get there by looking at the craziness that's the fake alternative,
Right.
that might be a pretty good technique, because pretty soon the contrast will become obvious that there are moments of respite and peace that are available if we try it, and then it kind of, they start to stitch together and become more unified fabric of dedication and renewed commitment and and discipline, a gentle discipline for training our minds.
Right. Now comes a period of settling down. This is a quiet time in which the teacher of God rests a while in reasonable peace. I think I said the other night in class that I asked Ken if it was possible to skip this stage because I kind of don't remember a period of settling down with the course. I'm sure I had a little bit of that, but anyway. So now he consolidates his learning. So, we have a time where it seems to be, okay, well, I think I understand this, and I think I know how to feel better and to forgive. So now he begins to see the transfer value of what he has learned. And that is like the idea that I forgive you and I feel better. I let go of judgment and I feel better, right? Its potential is literally staggering, and the teacher of God is now at the point in his progress at which he sees it as his whole way out. Give up what you do not want and keep what you do. How simple is the obvious, and how easy to do. The teacher of God needs this period of respite. He has not yet come as far as he thinks. Yet when he is ready to go on, he goes with mighty companions beside him. Now he rests a while and gathers them before going on. He will not go on from here alone. So there's that give up what you do not want and keep what you do, but there's still a me that's doing the giving up in this stage. Yep. And that's okay with us, right?
Yeah.
That feels
we need that that little plateau before ascending a more perilous precipice.
The practice of this, but so when he's ready to go on, we have these mighty companions beside him.
Right.
And he's not talking about other course students or teachers or anything like that. He's really, the mighty companions are just the gifts of God within us, the thoughts of God, the strength of our right mind within us, right? Yeah. Our teacher, and the way he views the dream as, seeing only our shared interests, seeing only our innocence, seeing only our right to awaken, regardless, victims and victimizers alike, right? So he rests a while and gathers them before going. He will not go on from here alone.
Yeah. I was thinking sort of like climbing up Mount Everest, metaphorically, and we need the base camps before we, make the next difficult climb.
Just to the altitude,
yeah. Right. It's that too, I suppose. Yeah, that's another part of the metaphor.
And we've gone through the workbook, hopefully, and so at least we're introduced to the practice. We kind of know some of the, we have the basic idea that this is about forgiveness. We don't quite fully know what that means yet, And again, we still think that there's a person that's doing the forgiving, and we usually bring our prior ideas of what forgiveness means in the world, which is, I really am forgiving another body. Right. Even if we're intellectually grasping that the course is saying something different, we usually are still looking at it that way.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's important to be really gentle with ourselves, because we're so steeped in projection and don't recognize the vastness of that oceanic practice as egos, that, when we actually have those rare moments of realizing, oh, this is nothing about the other person. It's really my own. I'm letting myself off the hook, and it has nothing to do with the other person. Those initially seem far and few between, but then they can grow too as well. So, yeah. In terms of the Everest metaphor, I was also thinking, this is one sort of whimsical idea that comes to mind once in a while. Is, basically the curriculum Jesus is asking us to consider is that, on your own, you're going to be using all of the best mountaineering gear, but you're going to be struggling every step of the way and groaning and straining. But Jesus is over here in this climate controlled escalator, and he's saying, hey, over here, I've got an easier way. Come on over here, you might like this, and that's the forgiveness escalator, the true forgiveness. And like you were saying, it's so easy to think, oh, I'm forgiving someone else, but it's my classroom that I need to do, and and the only person playing hooky is me, and everyone in truth is already home, and I'm just the
Right.
straggler here. And if we can remember that, then it lets everybody off the hook, and then then it just becomes an easier way to be gentle with ourselves, I think.
Yeah, we all made it home already, so
Right, right.
that's always can be a comforting thought.
Yeah,
And no one flunks the course, so
right.
that's the other one I like to think of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you want to read the, the nasty stage,
Oh, sure.
the
And
dark
again,
night of the
it's
soul.
only because we've put about most of our life savings into all this fancy climbing gear, and by golly, we're gonna do it on our own and through our own efforts, right? I mean, that's sort of that John Wayne, I can do it myself kind of
Right.
attitude. Yeah. Uh, the ego machismo, perhaps. Okay, number 5. The next stage is indeed a period of unsettling, he has in quotes. Now must the teacher of God understand that he did not really know what was valuable and what was valueless. All that he really learned so far was that he did not want the valueless and that he did want the valuable. Yet his own sorting out was meaningless in teaching him the difference. The idea of sacrifice, so central to his own thought system, had made it impossible for him to judge. He thought he had learned willingness, but now he sees that he does not know what the willingness is for. And now he must attain a state that may remain impossible to reach for a long, long time. He must learn to lay all judgment aside and ask only what he really wants in every circumstance. Were not each step in this direction so heavily reinforced, it would be hard indeed. And as I was sharing before, that last sentence, I think, is the saving grace in this, because otherwise one could get really, really
Yes.
discouraged reading this, because he even says a long, long time, not just a long time, but a long, long time. So, if we take that at face
Right.
value,
Right.
that could be really just discouraging, because we think, well, hey, let's just take this weekend class and workshop in forgiveness, and instant diploma, and here we go, kind of thing. But no, it's a gradual process requiring a lot of patience and tolerance with ourselves, and gentleness as we go through this.
Right. And
And
really, really that constant recognition. Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, and then the other part is the, that Ken elaborates on wonderfully and in great detail, how, this so-called dark night of the soul stage really is something that, we go through as we recognize that, as you were pointing out a moment ago, Susan, that, it's not the individual self that's doing it, it's really the decision maker. And until we completely identify with the decision maker in our mind, and not think in terms of the Bruces and Susans in the world doing the work, and we have to ultimately drop that as a concept and as an identity in order to be truly helpful. And that's something that I don't think we get for a while, and it's a slow process to do that. The other thing I find really helpful, and I think that there's something in Gary Renard's teachings that I liked, and that is that if we can learn to see all of spirit in everyone, and practice that whenever we can, then the shared interest that we have, that Ken talks about is one of the 2 themes in the manual, along with trusting Holy Spirit, becomes more and more important, because the shared interest gives us a different identity as a shared identity, because we're not doing things just for ourselves, we're doing it for the entire sonship, as the Course would say. We're doing it for everyone, and that everyone is really a new identity that is the Holy Spirit's ocean, the pristine ocean that's unlike the polluted one that the ego's
Right.
ocean. And Holy Spirit's ocean really does transform all the little droplet wannabes that we think we are into one glorious, joyous identity that really transcends anything we possibly could have done on our own. And I think that's really part of the
Yeah. I mean,
reinforcement on each step, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, I think this section really is where we confront our resistance.
Oh.
We really are come
Mm-hmm.
up against the,
Mm-hmm.
the resistance too, that we just really that, you know, again, that I have sorted out the value from the valueless based on what I believe as a personal self. And it suddenly dawns on me that I don't know anything, really. And, you know, that this is really saying that you have to rely completely on Jesus for in all circumstances. And you know, what you were bringing as a personal self, as you were saying, it's we're not, you know, we're the chooser, but all we are is capable of really is constantly challenging our unkind thoughts and really seeing that we need help, you know. And we think we're in control of the journey. We think we can manage it somehow. And that illusion just kind of shatters in this stage.
And even with,
and I think that's what's so difficult.
for sure. I was going to say
Even with,
that
yeah, right.
happens
I
even
mean,
without the events of the
if we
last 2 or
are
3
so
months, right?
heavily,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Well, and we have to, but you know, I mean, what this really is and why it's called the dark night of the soul, I think, is because really the only way we can get through this stage is to keep reaching out and leaning into that love in our mind. And yet there's part of us that feels like that love has abandoned us because we don't, you know, we're not aware of our resistance to it. And so it feels very dark and lonely a lot of the time. You know, it feels like, you know, what am I missing here? And so that is really where, you know, we just have to, I mean, we have to trust. We're kind of going on blind faith that even though I'm not experiencing Jesus right now, that the love is still there and it will lead me through. That you know, I remember Ken saying in one of his interviews that to me to trust that the process that has led you this far will not fail you now. You know, this is once initiated, and once as long as you're consistently applying this, you'll make it through. You know. And of course, it isn't you that's making it through, but the healing of the mind, of the fragment of the mind that you are, decision-making mind, will get to peace because your desire will bring you there. And but you know, we have to. This is a course in kind of passing through the circle of fear. But we can't do that alone. We have to keep reaching for that hand that's reaching down from outside the dream of Jesus. And even when we don't feel it, we don't see it. You know, that's what's required ultimately to get through this. And that's trust, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, we have to be willing to consider that maybe there's another way of looking at things, and that we're you know, look down at the diploma that we cherished and discovered that the degree was in cluelessness. And you know, that's okay that we're clueless.
Right.
But right. We do have,
and we do finally, you know, I mean, again, this isn't linear. Sorry, sometimes there's an overlap.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a lag.
Audio.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, and so, well, I was just going to move on to the final paragraph. Is there anything else you wanted to know? Okay.
Well, I think
and finally, someday, there is a period of achievement. It is here that learning is consolidated. Now what was seen as merely shadows become solid gains, to be counted on in all emergencies as well as tranquil times. Indeed, the tranquility is their result, the outcome of honest learning, consistency of thought, and full transfer. So this is you know, as we've like moved up the ladder, right? And the guilt has been undone through this process. And so this is the stage of real peace, for here is heaven's state fully reflected. we see only love and calls for love, you know, that, and we respond lovingly because there's no guilt to block it, right? And we're not identified with this personal self. You know, we're still here in the world, and we may look the same to others, but our foreheads are serene all the time. You know, we're not disturbed by the world's doings. So this is the stage of real peace, for here is heaven's state fully reflected. From here, the way to heaven is open and easy. In fact, it is here. Who would go, in quotes, anywhere if peace of mind is already complete? And who would seek to change tranquility for something more desirable? What could be more desirable than this? Right.
Exactly. Yep. I'm picturing, backpacking trips where you've climbed up a long canyon and finally reach this, a glorious meadow in the alpine realms, and it's like kind of thing. So, and there is a feeling of release and just relaxation that comes from knowing that that's really our real state. That's our real being, and you know,
And that
we can
relief.
afford to look forward to it and be patient with ourselves even while we're seemingly beset with all kinds of crazy things. And in the course, uh, it says, our something to the effect of, you probably remember the quote, your role isn't to be free of problems, but to use them.
None to keep, or yeah, right, or
Yeah.
anger, I think I was thinking of. But yeah, I mean, to really apply this, we try to generalize it eventually, and
Mhm.
that's not where we start out. We come to the course with a hierarchy of illusions, but we learn that over time, over practice, and willingness to keep being wrong and questioning our projections, um, we learn that, I forgot my train of thought there, but we become we become the right mind. We eventually grow into, what we saw was our teacher, and become, we just integrate the course completely at some point, and then we're in the real world at that point. Because again, there's no conflict. There's nothing blocking our awareness to love's presence, and we see that it's in everyone, that it always was, and it has nothing to do with behavior or form, or any of the barriers that we saw before.
Mhm.
So
That sounds pretty nice. I
it
think I'll,
does
I
sound
think I'll,
nice.
I think I'll, I think I'll sign up for that.
Go there, yeah. Problem is, we get to the top, and then there's like a hailstorm, and we go running back down the ladder.
Well, if you can dive into your tent. I'm actually remembering a backpacking trip where I did exactly that. Uh, with,
I've had some of those when climbing mountains, with running into some really bad weather.
yeah,
Uh,
just like got to the meadow, and it's like, about 12,000 feet, and it's like, oh, whopping hailstorm! Quick, set up the tent.
yeah,
then I remember
yeah,
after that episode, literally after I threw everything in the tent, and it's like, whew, and then the storm stopped, just abruptly.
right,
but
right.
but it's one of those things that if we think that it's supposed to be free of problems, no, the problems really are the way that we look at the stuff in our unconscious mind, and we need all the things that seem to happen to us as our classroom. And without that, as Ken points out, without those specifics, we would never have a way to see what's in our unconscious mind. And that's why Holy Spirit says, your your script isn't to be free of problems, it's to use them to undo and to further the development of trust. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Good
that's why the
stuff.
times that we're in right now are such an opportunity.
Oh,
Yep.
tremendously so. Tremendously
So
so. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. Always
Yeah.
enjoy our conversations. Anything else you'd like to share?
Thank you.
I think we did a pretty good, very quick, but
I
pretty
think
good
so.
run of those 6 steps there. Yeah. Yeah. All
Can't
righty.
read it enough. I mean, it's everything is helpful, and the manual is just. It's been a long time since I've read the manual, and we're going through it in my Tuesday class, and as you know, and it's every time you go back to parts of the course that you haven't read in a long time, you're just astonished at how much more deeply you're understanding it, and
It's Yeah, just like it's been rewritten. Who rewrote that?
yeah,
Well, since I looked at it last.
awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Well, you
you.
can find Susan's wonderful writing and lots more on foraysinforgiveness.com. And I'll be posting this conversation as well on acimblog.com. And thanks as always to Susan and to everyone listening for your support. And look forward to the next conversation.
You too. Thank you.
Alrighty.